All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to tonight's podcast of All Things Physics with dental school hopeful and philanthropist. You know him, that's right, that really good-looking single guy who will forever remain single until he stops making podcasts about physics, Trevor Dutson. Tonight's broadcast is brought to you by the Atomic Company. It's like having a friend in the proton business. Everything from certified protons, neutrons, and electrons. So, remember, the Atomic Company, your friend in the proton business. Hi, this is Trevor, and welcome to this week's podcast of All Things Physics. Tonight I'm going to go over a summary of what we went through, things that we studied as a class for my physics class, as well as telling you a little bit of what I actually learned from it, and then kind of give some connections of how it relates to my life. All right, so first things first, a summary of the things that we did throughout the week. We had 3 different assignments. The first was to read an article entitled "The Educational Value of Creative Disobedience," and the article was about the limitations that imitation learning brings on a child or on an individual, and kind of hinders them from exploring creativity or fostering creativity into individuals and students. And we were assigned to not only read the article, but to write our thoughts in a discussion post about the article. A second assignment we had was to watch a TED TV video about the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. And our assignment for that was to watch the video and then to look up some neat resource online and to post a link for others in the class to look up some different things where the Heisenberg uncertainty principle has made it into popular culture. And the third assignment that we had was which was a very long assignment in my opinion, but it was a very good assignment. It was to watch a 3-video series about string theory, and it was called, the assignment was called The Elegant Universe, and we were supposed to write our thoughts on about some of the things that we learned, and on another discussion post about each individual video, and then as a whole. And since I keep forgetting in these weekly reports to say how long I have worked on physics, I was very adamant about keeping track on how much time I spent each day on this class. And by the time I'm done with this podcast and editing it, it'll probably be close to 15 hours. So there you have it. I spent a good quality time this week with this physics class, and it was very educational. So moving on. So, on to the section of describing what I learned from what I actually did. In that first assignment that we had to read that article entitled "The Educational Value of Creating Disobedience," the author talked about imitation learning. And she said how imitation learning hinders the creativity because you're just following what your teacher says or your mentor says or what your parent says, and you just do what they do, and it doesn't really encourage the creativity of a child or a student. Even though I completely agreed with that, I did say in my discussion post that I said, although I agreed with her comments on how imitation learning hinders students' creativity and their problem-solving skills, I do see the benefits of imitation learning with some things, especially at the building of the foundation of any given topic. One must know and understand the basics in order to ask questions which will lead to problem-solving skills. Language learning is one, and learning to read is another. And I was just giving those 2 examples of learning a new language and learning how to read, because everyone has had to learn a new language for one, and everyone has had to learn how to read just about. I, for one, have learned, I'll say I'm midway through learning a third language. I speak English. I lived in the Philippines for 2 years on a Mormon mission, so I learned how to speak a language called Cebuano. But you don't use Cebuano very much here in the United States. And so after I got back, I decided to study Spanish. And so I took 2 years of Spanish at a Mesa Community College. And I do pretty okay. But the whole point of it is that when I was learning Cebuano initially, the first time learning a foreign language, that wasn't my own English, I some of my trainers and other missionaries that had been there longer, they had just said, you got to fake it till you make it. I know you're not going to understand everything, and you're probably not going to say everything correctly, but if you just listen and imitate, they didn't use the word imitate, but they said just say how they're saying it. I remember, for example, I was saying something wrong. I emphasized something wrong, and another missionary, I'd been saying it for a certain way for months, and this missionary heard me say it one time, and he's like, that's not how you say it. And I'm like, what are you talking about? No one has said otherwise. And he goes, well, look, we asked a native Filipino, if this is how I was supposed to say it. And like, no, you're saying it wrong. And I'm like, geez, why didn't anyone say anything beforehand? I've been saying it this wrong way these last few months. So anyways, I had failed to listen to how people were saying certain things, and I just started saying it how I thought they should be said, like I know. Anyways, but after that, I really started paying attention to how people said things, and then I mimicked them. I followed, I imitated how they were saying things, and not too long after that, I got very, very fluent. And to this day, a lot of Filipinos, when they hear me speak Cebuano, they couldn't tell that I was a white guy. I wasn't an American. Same thing when I was learning Spanish. I just listened to how people say it, and I tried to say exactly how they say it. When they intone, on their intonation, or how they fluctuate certain words. So I see the benefit in imitation learning on that, as well as reading. When you're showing a child, this is what the letter A looks like, and it makes the sound ah, like in cat. And when a kid or any student is learning the fundamental basics of any topic, I think imitation learning is very good. But just like I said in my post, I said one must know and understand the basics in order to ask questions, which will lead to problem-solving skills, and which will lead to creativity, and which will lead them to investigate. The same thing with, we watched a video about string theory that I'll talk about in a little bit, but it was interesting how they went through like a history of how certain physics theories came about, as technology basically got better and better. They were able to dig deeper and deeper and deeper, and to discover things that were smaller and smaller and smaller. But they needed to have a basic understanding of, a certain element, we'll say, before they could move on and understand and try to understand things that they couldn't understand. It just led to learning more. And so in the second assignment that we had I said earlier, was to watch a TED TV video about the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. And what I learned from that, I was rather, not say confused throughout the video. It just didn't make sense why they were saying a particle and a wave were two different things, as while after watching the string theory and learning more and more about atomic physics, at the atomic level, I was thinking a lot throughout the week, about waves and sound waves and how they continue like a ripple effect. And I'm all like, if they're talking about a single particle, it's just a single particle. I was like, but a wave, and in my mind it's like a wave is, say, a whole bunch of particles on a, like, connected. And so when in last semester in physics class, we did this experiment where we had a slinky and it was completely stretched out, and then we wiggled the string and then we measured how fast it went to the other side and back, the wave on that slinky. And I was like, a wave, the slinky, the wave could not continue waving unless the slinky was, does that make sense? The slinky had to be connected the entire time in order for the wave to continue. And so it didn't make sense throughout the video. It was like why they're trying to, if they're talking about one individual particle, why it acts differently in a wave. But anyways, after I watched the video for a second time and paid a little bit more attention, at the very end of the very last thing that the video says, it says, the uncertainty principle isn't just a practical limit on measurement, it's a limit on what properties an object can have built into the fundamental structure of the universe itself. And once I heard that, really paid attention, we'll say, to that last statement that they're talking about, the whole point of the video came a lot more clear to me. It's like, oh, that's why this is so important. I personally hadn't ever heard of, we'll say, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. I do have heard it into an extent of when I was taking general chemistry, and they said, when you're taking measurements, it's like there's always a level of uncertainty. I just didn't realize that was, kind of part of what Heisenberg was talking about. And so it was nice to just flat out learn more about it. The last assignment that we had was learning about string theory. And I mentioned earlier that we watched 3 different videos about string theory, and it kind of gave a history of how the theory came about. There was a lot of things that I learned. I have never really been a science person. I've always been really into music and to history, and science just wasn't my forte growing up. But since I have, trying to get into dental school, you have a lot of science prerequisites, and so it's been a fun challenge, we'll say, to have to take all of those different science classes and try to understand or learn about things that I didn't really initially care to learn about at first, because I didn't see the relevance in them in learning how to fix teeth and repair teeth, But anyways, as I, learned more and more about general chemistry and organic chemistry and biology and now physics, I kind of understand a little bit better of, wow, so much around me is all connected with these sciences, and I think about things differently. And it's weird why I think about things differently when I, about life. But anyways, so in this third section about, and it called The Elegant Universe, learning more about string theory, I didn't really know a whole lot about relativity, Einstein's law of, or theory of relativity. I didn't know much about that. I didn't know much about string theory. But what I learned, besides all the basic things about string theory, it was just what amazed me the most was, man, there is so much math and time and effort and work that went into just to come up with this stuff or to figure these things out and to figure out these mathematical equations and test them and test them and test them, just to try to figure out some of the forces in nature. And it's not only truly amazing to me to learn more about all that effort and all that kind of stuff, but also to see how they use their understanding and put it to good use to help better this world. So that is that section. The final section of this podcast is kind of making a connection between what I learned and from what, or try to connect it with my life. What I would say is that during the string theory videos, even though it was the longest amount of time that I needed to spend in doing that assignment, because each of those videos were just under an hour long, but they were the most fascinating to me. I enjoyed that the most throughout the week. But anyways, I am a religious person. I believe in intelligent design. And so when learning about string theory, it was interesting to correlate and to make connections with what I believe, how God created this world and the universe, with all the little strings of energy and how they are very chaotic, it said, and I wish I could remember the exact words, how they were describing these little strings of energy. But, in my personal beliefs, God takes these little finite, we'll say, things of matter. We'll just call those little strings of energy just finite matter, finite energy, we'll say, things that are chaotic. And anyways, he gives them order, and says, all right, this is how you're going to do something. This is what you're going to do. And he gives, gets a couple of these or a whole bunch of these little things of energy, these little strings of energy together, and lets them work together and gives them more order and more law. And so I listened to this thing a long time ago that talked about God science. But anyways, say he takes all of these little things of energy and gives them order and says, all right, this is what you're going to do. You're going to act like what we call a hydrogen has this, this type of a property. It does this. It has one full electron with one proton and one neutron, right? And he says, all right, now we'll take these groups of little strings of energy, we'll say, or little things of matter, and put a whole bunch of them together. And all right, this is an oxygen. This is how these are your properties. And you do this and blah, blah, blah. And he said, and when you get mixed with two different hydrogens, you're going to become a water molecule. Anyways, so it was with my beliefs and understanding about how God created this universe. It was very interesting, like I said, to connect with a lot of the things that were being presented in those videos, which I just really enjoyed. It was very fun for me. But I think that's about it for this week's podcast of All Things Physics with Trevor. I hope you enjoyed it, and hope you learned a couple things too.